So you can take anything out of here, clean it, get it ready, and use it for printing. Supplies and materials include like all the paper on this rack, some of which has been cut down to smaller sizes, and some of which is big sheets. But we have a cutter here, so if we get to a project and you want this cut in half, you know, you can tell me, and I can come over and do it on this big cutter, and then it cuts really nice and straight and even, and it'll cut a big stack of paper all at once, so you don't have to stand at the paper cutter, you know. Okay, and then we have like, isn't it beautiful? Nice paper. And oh, some of Chesco's old paper. Although this is actually, this is some of the stuff we got for free last year. I'm going to pass it around so you can feel it. Feel that. Ooh, isn't that nice? What is it? There, you know. Come on, oohs and ahs. Feel it. How does it feel to your fingers?
Oh, cool.
Like velvety and isn't it beautiful? It's a paper material that's coated with vinyl. And so when you print on it, it's like printing on plastic. It's more than printing on paper. Yeah. And then, of course, it's black. So, like, if we print on black paper, that really does things to the colors. You know, it's not at all the same as printing on something like that. But even this one, look at that one. It's got like sort of mother of pearl. Can you see that finish to it? Kind of shiny. So there's some really beautiful stuff in here. And this is all like free. Hello. Hello. Free and available for you guys to use. And if you scrounge around, you know, there's like all kinds of neat stuff.
Do you want that only cut on your paper cutter? Like
you may cut it by hand if you
just
want.
Like if you want to put in your, you know, your sketchbook, little samples
to
of
trim
the
it
paper,
down or
just
something.
a little piece, like
sure.
to do something. Is
yeah.
that okay to
sure.
take
That's
a little
fine.
piece off?
That's fine. Yeah. And our one of our issues is once we pull this all out and get it all cut up, we don't know where it came from, or who the manufacturer was. You might have to take a sample if you wanted to try to find more of it, and go to like Kelly Paper and show it to them and say, what is this, and you know, where can I buy this? I want more. Okay. So, but there's a lot of wonderful things, and you know, paper's a lot of fun in printing. It really affects the way the inks look, and so by changing the kind of paper you're printing on, it can change all kinds of interesting things about the inks, and you don't know until you try it. And so that's one of the things like we encourage you to be creative with on this first project when we do the paper stencil. You can come over here and get a couple sheets of all kinds of different papers, all right? And if you get like 20 weird little pieces of paper and you want me to cut them all down to the same size, you know, I can do that, all right? So they're all the same size then. But try it on different surfaces just to see what it does, you know? Does it dry faster, dry slower, bleed more? Does the color look better or look duller? You know, like what happens? And sometimes, you know, you get weird effects and you didn't even expect that to happen. And then you're like, hey, cool, you know, look at what that did, you know. So anyway, you'll learn more about that. So make yourselves at home, helping yourselves to any of that. And then there are big stacks of paper too, which we just haven't gotten into yet. But if you happen to see a little corner of something sticking out and you're like, wow, what's under there? You know, if you can get somebody to help you take everything off the top and we can get down to the bottom, you know, we can use anything that's in here, okay? Squeegees are here, so anytime you need a squeegee for any kind of printing, you come over here, and you'll learn more about these sort of as we go along, but just for starters. The squeegees they're different sizes, of course, but they're not all the same either. And so I'll pass these around, and you can see that this one is really soft when you try to bend the blade, and this one is like super, doesn't hardly bend at all. It's real rigid. So it's like another one of the variables in printing is that the squeegee blades themselves are different, and so they're measured in what's called a durometer. It's a unit of hardness, and the harder the squeegee blade, the less ink it pushes through the screen. So for textile printing, we're using those softer, more flexible blades, or printing on papers that are more absorbent. And for things like plastics and glass, we're using the hardest squeegee we can find, and with the sharpest corner to it, the sharpest edge. So the more round the edge is on the squeegee blade, again, the more ink it puts through. Isn't that crazy? And the sharper the edge, the less ink. And so if they're in a company where they're printing on glass or ceramics, they're actually printing with like a squeegee that's cut to a bevel, like at one sharp point, not the square point like we are. You know, they're very specialized in that. And so that's kind of an interesting phenomenon, that by just changing the squeegee, you're changing how much ink is going through the mesh. And sometimes that's the first thing we do if somebody's having trouble printing and there's too much ink and it's going everywhere. We switch out the squeegee, like for starters. And then if that doesn't help, we go on to the next thing. Okay. Yeah. All right. And interestingly, the best squeegee blades, and many of these ones, are actually made in France. They come from France. Okay. So when you go to the trade shows and things, you find suppliers from all over the world. I don't know why squeegee blades in France, what the connection is there. Maybe cheeses or something. But like fabrics, for screen printing fabrics, the best manufacturers are all Italian. Because Italy, has a huge history of fabrics and weaving and, materials like that. And so they, through the centuries, they've just, added screen printing meshes onto whatever else they do. So Italians and like Swiss. This is like the lab area for printing, and you'll see these kind of wire racks all over the place. There's one there, there's one there. The idea of these is that we have to let the ink dry thoroughly on the surface of whatever we're printing on before we can do the next color. And so we'll lay our wet prints on a rack, and when it gets full, we just put the next one down and lay stuff on that and put the next one down. And sometimes at the end of the class period, your stuff is like way down at the bottom. You don't have to worry about taking it out of there, because somebody else later in the day when everything's dry will clear it all out and stack them together, and either we leave them on the table or we try to put them into these trays right here. And so we are Tuesday, Thursday a.m. So this is our tray. I'll go ahead and get rid of all this stuff in here. So an assignment. The end of a flash drive. An assignment that you've completed that was on the rack somewhere, most likely will be in here in the morning. When you finish your work, you turn it in to me like this by giving me the sample of what you did and filling out one of these assignment logs. Okay? Which I'll show you how to do that when we get there, okay? For that first project. And then you just put that in the tray, and I go through there, once a week and grade everything that's in there, and then I'll put it out on the table when you come in and give it back to you, okay? If you don't find your stuff in here, then first thing is check the other trays, because maybe somebody just thought, oh, that must be the night class, and so they put it in the wrong place, okay? Everything's always going to be here somewhere in the room.
Right.
Sometimes it's just a matter of, like, where did it go? What was somebody thinking when they put that away? Okay, so there are racks here that are kind of convenient to the printing spaces. Okay.
So don't call the campus police immediately.
This is kind of a little supply cart. That was really grungy, but it has everything in it that we need, like paint sticks for stirring, these little cardboard scraps we use to scrape excess ink off the screen and put it back in the container, tape. These are spray bottles full of water mixed with a little bit of Windex, which helps keep the ink from drying. Because, it's water-based ink, it's going to air dry. As it sits on your screen and you're printing, it can be real thin when you start, and a half hour later, it's all thick and kind of gooey because it's evaporating, as we go. So sometimes we have to keep spraying water on the screen to kind of keep the ink moist and, keep it from drying up in the mesh. Okay, and other little miscellaneous tools, rulers, yardsticks, sinks, here and here. This is the wall of screens that you can't take them. All right, somebody's using them, so they're off limits. Over here, we have a series of drawers full of what we call just scrap paper. So they're just like extra things that people left and didn't want. And we just, if something's messing up, we get a few of these, put them onto the screen, print until the image is coming out clean, and then we keep going on our good paper, okay? But you don't want to, yes.
Is that, what about these things, if there's no room over there?
All of these are used, yeah, this whole sort of side of the room, yeah, is taken. So they're supposed to be sort of in here by size, and then there's another tray that has pieces of clear acetate in, okay? And we'll use these for registration on and off.
And if you're planning to use multiple colors, we recommend that you use this rack just because it's easier. You can just go in, you can just put your stuff in, take it out. If you're planning to use multiple colors within the same class, then, or like CMYKs, and you'll learn about that later. And so that way you don't have to lift the whole rack.
Yeah,
and
there's
get your
some
stuff
tricks
out.
about racking which is putting your stuff in here. So if you're working on something and you're way at the bottom, if you position your papers so that they're sticking out just a little bit, then even once this rack is all full, you know, I can go around and off the sides or from the front, I can almost pull everything out of there, okay? And I'm not gonna be like, how do I get down there to get my stuff out, okay? So that's like one of the tricks. And then that rack is, of course, much easier to take things on and off of because you can get at it anytime. This drawer is full of little strips of sort of heavy paper that are just scraps, but we use these also for registration to help us register things. So just so you know they're there, and when we get to printing, you'll see like what we do with those and why. Here's more paper, blue, there's some blue in there, and there's more paper under there. And there's ink in all these different cabinets, but there's different ink in every cabinet. So that's why you don't want to just like go in a cupboard and like, oh, yeah, I like this color green, and then you start printing with it and it won't dry or something, you know, there's something like terrible wrong with it because you're using something that's a whole different family from what we're supposed to be using. So the only cupboards we're going to be worrying about to start with is this one right here, and this has all of our regular screen printing ink in. Most of which is water-based, and there are containers of pure colors. All right, so this is the orange, the way we buy it, and then there are all these mixed containers. People have made different colors. So you're welcome to mix, of course, your own colors, and we encourage you to do that. Down under here, you can see we have glass containers and water-based containers, plastic. So any kind of little tubs like this at home with a lid that you have, if you rinse them out and bring them in, ooh, look at this.
They are greatly
Some, like,
appreciated.
really healthy person, plain non-fat yogurt. Wow, there's a ton of them in here. All right, that didn't come from my house. But if you rinse those out and bring them in, you know, then it's nice to have lots of those things. Everybody in the class will use them. And so, you know, it's like there's a few people bringing stuff in and everybody else is just like, where's all the containers? Like, well, what did you bring in, you know? So contribute with that. It's nice if you label the inks just to be on the safe side so that people know what it is. And, you know, people will kind of try to do that. So cyan.
Oh, and they put their combination on it?
Yeah.
Like a little bit their formula?
Yes, their formula, and sometimes they give them interesting names. So we all have a laugh at that, you know. But it's nice that at least you know that's what's in there. Half-tone black. Okay, good.
A class that really helps you a lot with colors is the color composition class, 31A.
Yeah, Art 31A.
Art 31A, and it really helps you to be able to know how to mix colors, how much to put in order so that you can get that right color that you need. Because there's different kinds of reds. There's a cool red and a warm red. There's a cool yellow and a warm yellow. So depending, you might just think, oh, I'm just going to mix red and yellow and get orange. Well, it's not that simple.
Yeah. And we also, just like in painting, we can thin our colors down so that they're very transparent. So when you print two colors on top of each other, you can see through to what's underneath. And when they overlap, they make a different color. So if you're printing red and yellow and they're both transparent, where they overlap, they're going to make orange. And so you get a free color that way. And if you learn how to print and work with that, you can develop, you know, lots more interesting things in your images with, you know, fewer layers printing. And then we can have the colors be opaque so that they cover each other and you don't see anything through from one color to the other.
I have a quick question. What do you find can you mix transparent and opaque, and what happens?
Like overlapping?
No, and actually if you're mixing together, does it totally kill any transparency, or can you get degrees of transparency by adding
Oh yeah,
opaque?
you can get degrees of transparency. Yeah. So inks are made of, we'll talk about this more in a little bit, but inks are made of like a number of materials, of something that keeps them fluid, and chemicals that kind of keep everything from sinking to the bottom. If you had colored pigment and water and you just mix them together, all the pigments would just sit in the bottom of the container. So there are things in the ink that keep it sort of in suspension so that the different colored pigments and things are floating where they should be. And they have things in that either make them dry shiny or make them dry dull, you know, a matte finish or a shiny finish. Those chemicals are all in the ink. And so they make a version of ink which is this clear, which is everything that's in ink except the color. There's just no pigment in here. So we can take this and mix it with our pigmented inks, and it actually sort of makes the pigments stretch out more. So there's fewer pigments per, whatever, and that's what makes the colors more transparent. There's more nothing and fewer pigments. And so we can play with the percentage of clear that we add to an ink and get varying degrees of transparency. We can get, colors that are just like barely there, just a hint of color. Or we can get, something that's still pretty strong, but it'll overlap and show something through underneath.
But these colors are matte or glossy?
These are all have like a matte finish when they dry. Okay, it's not glossy. However, when you print on certain papers, because of the coating on the paper, it renders the inks more glossy. So sometimes that's one of the things you find out. If you really want glossy ink and you print on the right kind of paper, it'll be glossy, and otherwise it's generally going to be matte. Okay.
Is there something like the clear thing to make them glossy?
You can get glossier inks. We find most people don't want things to be too glossy, but you can buy inks that are more glossy, and you can buy inks that are absolutely flat, like a chalkboard, like that kind of a finish. These are sort of in between there. Okay, and then this is a semi-automatic press, which is used in the advanced classes. Hopefully we'll have somebody on it really fast. Like the kind of thing they'd have in a commercial shop. And so when you print on this, it does all the printing for you. It does the print stroke, and it feeds the ink back in, and all you have to do is put a piece of paper in it and take it out and put it on the rack, So you put in and take out, and usually you put in and somebody else would be taking out, so that you're just kind of always feeding paper in and somebody's feeding paper out. And so it's a very fast production tool. If you want to make 500 posters, you can crank them out on here in just no time. And then you're not exhausted. And of course, you're all young, so what do you know about that? But when you print a lot, when we do a long run of prints and there's 2 or 3 colors and you're over and over and over, you feel it in your shoulders, and it's like a workout, it's physical. So this is really nice for any kind of really big jobs that you might want to run. And eventually everybody will learn how to use it.
Do you find though that it doesn't have a feeling like of a hand pulled?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
it doesn't have the same control that you have when you're printing.
But a super printer is going to almost get that. But isn't it still different? You get what I'm asking?
Yes.
Is there a feeling
Yeah.
oh, this is a hand pulled?
Absolutely. It's just a machine, it just prints, and it just does that forever. But it's not going to sense, if you have a blend and you're printing a shift of color from one color to another, as you print, you can see if the blend is moving where you don't want it, and then you compensate by your squeegee technique. This won't do that. It'll just keep printing, So it's not sensitive to nuance and things like that. Okay. Then over here we have some supplies. Commonly used are these top 2 drawers. This one has sheets of clean, clear plastic in. Okay, so just so you know that's there. And this one has little scraps of this material, which is called ruby lith, which we'll be using in our next assignment. And sometimes, that's a nice scrap. So if you need a piece of it to work on a project and maybe you messed up or something and you're afraid to ask me for another piece, you can come in here and see if there's a little bit that you can use. Okay, but we try to save that stuff because somebody will use it eventually for something. Okay, and then I guess here.
Solvent.
Smell a little solvent, yeah.
Rags and gloves.
Right. Okay, so come on, squeeze on in. Yeah. I'm thinking most everything's pretty dry in here at this point in time, but I wouldn't lean on anything. Just. So this is what we call the solvent room, and it has a ventilation system up here that's just on low right now. When it's on high, it sounds like an airplane. And so it takes the stuff out as fast as possible. And this is where we come to clean solvent-based things out of the screens. We probably won't even need to be in here for the first, little while. There are rags generally up here. If we run out, then ask me. And there are usually gloves in a box up here. Again, let me know if we run out. We keep some ink storage in here, and then we keep our solvents in these metal containers. Okay, these are safety containers, and so you squeeze this handle to open it, but then it's always closed so that, again, they're not evaporating into the air, okay? And so usually there'll be one of these out on the table. If it runs out or there's nothing in it, there's the kind of the master container there, and a funnel, and you know, you guys can sort of get somebody to help you and refill them. Okay. And then the next room is the water room. And so in here we have screens that people did not quite finish cleaning, or they cleaned them and they just didn't get put away, so we'll try to clear that out. And again, this is where we sort of prepare the screens for the new layer of emulsion. And so the screens, as I mentioned, and like, we'll get into this more, are like, you know, the mesh is like a grid, like if you think of graph paper. And so it's pretty easy to get the ink out of the openings, but where the little threads crisscross, each of those little joints they call a knuckle. And so that's the place where ink and emulsion and stuff gets stuck, is in those little cracks. And if you don't clean your screen thoroughly, those things kind of build up, and pretty soon the ink is not going to be able to go through, and it's going to dry out too fast, or areas are not going to print, and you're going to be like, whoa, what happened here? This is supposed to be all red, and there's a white dot in the middle, like, ah. Okay, it's because you didn't clean your screen out thoroughly enough. So we'll go through and show you how to do that. We use a power pressurized water spray to do it. So no chemical, nothing problematic about that. But it just is like a lot of pressure comes out of that thing, so you want to be careful when you're using that tool. You know, you don't get it in somebody's eye or something. And then, you know, screens there. And sometimes people will put a chemical called haze on the screen. And then they put them over in this corner. And the haze helps remove traces of ink. Like this screen is actually pretty clean, but you can see the image in there that was printed, because the ink has kind of stained the fabric. And so it's almost like a bleach process that we use to get that stain out of there. Even though it wouldn't block ink, it's sort of annoying, and you can't sort of see what you're doing because there's like other image in there. And so we try to get those images out as much as we can and keep the screen mesh nice and clean.
I just put some haze on that one.
On this?
Yeah,
okay.
just because yeah.
Yeah, so same thing. You could see somebody was printing business cards there. And then, you know, if you're not careful, like who knows how this happened, you know, but oh, just makes me want to cry. You know, really beautiful screen, fine yellow mesh. Fine meshes are more sensitive, like to tears and rips. And so somebody poked that somewhere or put a screen in the rack and, you know, bumped the corner of it into the screen mesh, and because they're tight. You know, they're stretched on, they're tight. And so if anything compromises that tension, you know, they'll just tear. So now we have to re-stretch it, and that's a pain. There's a light switch here for the room. The switch for the fan is on the wall here. And these are like, again, safety switches, so you're not supposed to be able to get a shock. So the ghosts. So, come on, let's stop it. We haven't run it for a while, you can tell.
What was that?
The fan. That's the ventilation system.
I thought it was someone's cell
The
phone.
harpies. So we usually have that on just all the time, you know, just like let that run, because that's taking air out here and air out in here, and cycles it through the room, you know, so that
I was taking ions out
we're a little healthier, yeah. And if you happen to come in and this isn't on, the light switch is right here for this, okay? And that backlight just helps you see what you're doing when you're cleaning out screens, okay? It's just a nice little feature. Okay. Areas for your stuff. If you end up with things that you, like papers that you're printing, you know, stencils, materials, you don't want to take them all the way home, bring them all the way back. You will get a flat file in here. And so people are already starting to fill them up. But there's usually room for like at least 2 people in one drawer, and you can either go side by side, or if they have this divider, one can be above and one can be down below. And your color for Wednesday, Friday class is green. All right, so it's the green labels. Any drawer with a green label, if there's room, you can put your stuff in. Well, let's try over here. Yes. All right, so somebody's using that. but nobody's using the top of it. And so you can write your name on a piece of tape and put it here, and then keep your stuff in here, okay? And if you have a buddy in the class or you make friends with somebody, it's nice for the two of you to keep your stuff together, because then it's more like you watch out for each other, like make sure everybody's things are there. And I'll go through these and make sure that all this junk is thrown away, okay? And then in this room, look at that, even Dagwood had a screen. Or whatever his name was. So, probably just cleaned in here. So this is the room where we put the photo emulsion on the screens, which is why it has what's called safe light. It has no white light in it. And when we use that photosensitive emulsion, we don't want to get any white light on it, like ever, until we're ready to expose the image on the screen, and then we run it across to wash it out. And so when you're coating screens, you can't ever do it in the room. You can't take the bucket of emulsion out in the classroom, because if you open it up, it's like film, and you're exposing it to light, you know, and that'll like wreck it. So everything gets done in here, and then the screens go in these racks to dry, and then you come back later, the next day or something, and your screen's all ready to go. And so a nice coat of emulsion, except if they ran out a little down here, but this is a very nice coat of emulsion. It's a very thin layer, okay? It looks really good on there. So compared to this one, see, look, thick and lumpy. Oh, look, terrible. Can you see that? It was so thick it was starting to drip.
What caused that? They just put
Too much emulsion,
And they didn't
yeah.
use their squeegee button.
And so this won't work. We can't burn the screen. We might as well just take it in the washroom and wash it out, because it's not usable. If we try to expose this, all this film is going to just blister off and peel off.
I did that one time.
Have you done that? Yeah.
Can you use it on purpose to do a weird thing?
Yeah,
I mean, I
yeah.
just wondered what would
Right.
happen if, you know how sometimes you use weird mistakes?
Sure, and that could work. But for the most part, you know, you're going to have some kind of an image that,
It's exact.
yeah, that you've got it in your mind. It's a cat, and it's supposed to look like this. And then if it all washes out and looks like a blob instead, it's hard to say, like, well, what can I do with that? And so a screen like that has too much emulsion does this too.
And sometimes
it drips all over somebody else's nice screen.
if you have too much emulsion, it'll start dripping on the other one, and then you not only ruin your screen, but you ruin somebody
Yeah.
else's
Peeled it off.
screen.
Yeah, so it will peel it
Yeah.
off, but now there's a thinner area there, so it's really, you know, it's still not good, okay?
There's a how-to video that we've made about how to properly coat a screen on YouTube, and she'll share that with you guys.
Yeah, yeah, and when we get to this process, you know, we'll go through all the details and the ins and outs and, you know, all that. And so this is just kind of FYI right now. So this device is called an exposure unit, and it has a very bright light down in the bottom, a real focused light. You can kind of look in there and see. And it's on, but it's not going to blind you now, because it's just, the bulb is just warmed up. Do you want to take a peek in there? If you haven't ever seen what's in there. Ooh, that's all this big box of air with just a little light at the bottom. And what happens is we put our film on here, or our artwork, we put the screen on top of that, we close the top of this, we turn on a vacuum so that the artwork and the screen are held really tightly together. There's no like gaps or spaces, they're real tight. And then we turn on this light underneath, and the light rays come up from the bottom, and if they hit the film layer, they get blocked. And if they hit the emulsion, they cook it. The light rays will bake it, and it changes color even. And then when we take it out of here, usually we can see kind of a little shadow of where the image was, and we take it to the washroom, and wherever it got protected from light, it washes out. And everything that got hit by the light rays stays in, and it's more or less, you know, permanent until we're ready to take it out. And so this has 100% UV light. All right, it's the best thing for burning screens. And you can use any kind of light to burn a screen. You can use like a regular household light bulb. You probably use a flashlight, you know, if you wanted to. But a flashlight's like really weak. And so it would take you hours to burn a screen, whereas this is like 2,500 watts of pure UV light. And so it burns a screen in 20 to 30 seconds, okay, and you're done. Plus it has that vacuum feature, okay? But one of the things you'll learn is like it's light that makes those images work on the screens. And so, you know, like another great source of UV light is the sun. So you can burn screens outside in the sun if you want. And you just have to figure out a mechanism for keeping the film pressed nice and tight against the screen, which usually is a piece of clear glass, okay? Anyway, so we'll learn how to use that when we get there. These screens are up for grabs, all right? These aren't, of course. But if you get desperate and there's something in here, maybe somebody dropped the class and they aren't coming back, and so they just leave their screen there so somebody can use it rather than just waste it, okay? Photo emulsions like film, you know, although, like, anybody know what film is? Like, nobody's had film for years now because everything's digital. But if you remember the old days when you used to buy film, you often kept it in the refrigerator because by keeping it cool, you made it last longer because film has a shelf life. And so same with photo emulsions. You know, if you quote a screen today, thinking, you quote 10 screens today and think, okay, I'm done for the whole semester. By the time you get to May, the screens are no good anymore because they can't just sit forever indefinitely. The photo emulsion kind of uses itself up in a while, okay? So anyway, we try not to waste any more of that than possible, necessary. Yeah. Let's get in there. And then this is the textile printing area. And so we actually won't come over here much until sort of the end of the semester. There's what we call a belt dryer. And so this has a heating unit in it. It has a big heating element that runs across the top. And when we print t-shirts, we lay them on this belt and it's moving through there. And as it goes under through this chamber with all the heat in it, those inks harden, okay, when they get exposed to that much heat. And there's a certain amount of temperature and a certain amount of time that they have to get exposed for in order to be done. Like, you can't just sort of wave a heat gun at it and expect it to be dry. It has to get thoroughly cured all the way through the layer of ink. Over here is a little device for stretching screens. So, you know, it's another reason we cry when we see a screen torn. It's a waste, and then we have to, like, stretch it again. And it's a lot of work. So, but it's good to know how to do that because, you know, things happen. And so eventually we'll show you how that works, and, you know, as you hang around here longer, you can learn how to use that and learn the nuances of stretching a screen. We have two what are called rotary textile printers. And so I think I mentioned, look, there's some here. I'm not going to touch it. See, I'm not that dumb. Let's see, there's ink all over this knob. So if you don't touch it, like I got ink on myself in two places. Oh, thank you. So again, this is that area where you have to be really careful about things, and hopefully people clean up a little better, you know, than not to leave stuff like that. But this, I think I mentioned the first day that we, you know, have to print each layer sort of separately. And so in the printing of paper and rigid materials, we can print a color, you know, come back the next day, print another color, everything's going to match up because it's paper, it just sat there. With textiles, they stretch, and they stretch in every possible direction. And so when you print textiles, you have to print everything at once. You can't put the t-shirt down, print a color, run it through the dryer, line it up again, print the next color. You'd never get it in the same place twice. So we actually put a little bit of glue on these pallets, and we glue the shirt down, and then we have the different colors set up in here, whatever they are, and they're all set to line up with each other. And then we come and print, you know, first color on the shirt, and then next color on the shirt, and then next color on the shirt, kind of, until the shirt is done, and then we take it off of here and run it through that heat chamber. Okay, so it's like a different, you know, sort of set up for printing than when you print on paper. So you have to have a separate screen for each color in textile printing. So it gets a little more complicated than, you know, you can imagine. Rather than burning everything all together on one screen, you got to keep track of 3 or 4 or 5 screens. Okay? And it seems like crazy. Like, how can that work? Because the ink's wet. So you just printed a wet color, and then you're going to put another wet color on top of it? Yeah, well, it works. It just works. And you'll see, because everything is printing in the same place all the time. And so nothing is moving, and so there's no smearing or anything like that. And then this little device is another heater called the flash dryer. We have two of them, sort of a regular, with an electric panel in it. And this one is an infrared heat dryer, which is really nice. That's probably like $100 for one of those, or $200. And this is like $700 for this one because of this infrared feature. So if we need to dry a shirt in between colors, like we're printing 5 colors, and we're going to print the first 3 and dry it a little bit so they don't smear or bleed, and then print the last couple colors, we can use something like that, or we can use this one. That one, we plug it in, it gets really hot, and we have to kind of keep swinging it over the shirt, and kind of swing it over the shirt, but it's hot, and it's really hot. It's like 300 or 400 degrees, like a broiler. It's like a broiler on wheels. And so it can burn all kinds of stuff. If you leave it too long, it'll burn. If you leave it sitting over the table or over a can of ink, it'll heat it and cook it. It can burn your hand if your hand's there. This one heats up like instantly and will cure the ink on the shirt, and then it shuts off. And so it's much more sort of energy efficient and safe and all that sort of thing. So once you set it, you can't possibly really burn something with it, because it's set for a certain amount of time and it just shuts itself off. You don't have to remember to move it. And then we have several of these little 2-color presses, which are really nifty. I totally recommend these. We got them at Ryonet Screen Printing downtown LA. They're aluminum, so they're real lightweight. You can lift this whole part off of here, flatten it down, and it like fits under a bed or a table or something. And you can print 1 and 2 color t-shirts on here very easily. And they're very compact and easy to move around, and they were cheap too. Like, I don't know how they make them for that little. They're very nicely made though, they're real sturdy, okay? And then all textile printing inks over here. That's that hazardous area we don't want to get into right now. And for them, these screens are being used. The ones on the walls are the ones that are good, and the ones in the center of the room there are up for grabs, okay? But that's just for textile printing, those particular frames. And so, we aren't even going to come over here. We're going to stay on the other side of the room there, all right? But just so you know kind of what happens, and eventually we'll get over here, and you'll be able to try. To our screen printing rack. And then we drag this out to the flea market and we sell these, okay? So people buy them. We make a little extra money that way. So when you print your t-shirts, if you buy an extra one, even if it's like a thrift shop shirt, nobody cares. And then print it and throw it on here.
And you guys can buy one if you want.
You can buy them too. Yeah. See, they're shopping already. And then one more element in this area are these 2 things. These are called heat presses. And so they're in the textile area because they also work either to dry or to activate inks with heat, okay? And so, again, there's a platen at the top here. This upper part gets very hot, and then there's a lot of pressure that forces down. And so it'll either transfer like one of those like iron-on type transfers. It's used for putting those on garments. And it's also used for this area of printing called sublimation. I have any samples here. I don't see anything. But, like soccer jerseys or bicycle wear or swim trunks or bathing suits or, things that are polyester, synthetic materials like that have beautiful printed graphics on. Those graphics are all done using one of these machines. It's a heat transfer process. And so we have a printer next door that prints those inks. They're called sublimation dye inks. And so they look really dull and ugly here, but once we sublimate this and it gets exposed to heat, these colors all get like really super vivid, bright yellows and bright reds, and that's all activated by the heat. And what happens is actually the ink on the surface of this is turned into a gas when it gets hot. And so it'll turn into a gas and then go right into the fibers of the garment and dye the fibers of the garment. And so it's not printed on the surface like textile inks are. Textile inks are pretty much on the top of the t-shirt and they embed a little bit. these actually envelop the fibers of the garment in color, and so they're completely, like thoroughly, forever there. And they can't be washed out, they can't be removed, you know how those polyester garments are. You wash them, they look just as bright the next time as the first time. Whereas t-shirts and things, sometimes they kind of, fade down a little bit when you wash, okay? So the heat presses are really fun to use. There are all these other neat things like these foils. And so when you print on a garment, you can add, there's a little sample there, you can add this kind of bling to it by using these foil materials. So like I say, the textile area is really fun, and there's a lot of different effects and things that you can get with these inks. And then learning to combine them to make really interesting graphics, that's like your job. Okay.